Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Hall Podcast. Today, we have a broadcasting icon. I'm going to use the word icon. Lynda Steele. Welcome to the Hall. Hi, Lynda.
Hello, icon. Now I feel all stressed about having to be amazing, but thank you so much. I am so impressed with this place. Like, I want to move in here. It's got a fridge and a beautiful table and all kinds of cool tchotchkes and things around here and dummy heads and wigs. And my God, people could walk in here and think it was a movie set. This is cool.
That means a lot coming from yourself, because how many sets have you sat on, if you had to guess?
Like a million. In my home office right now, I have the actual glass plate from the front of the Global Edmonton anchor desk in Edmonton.
Took that on your way out?
You know how they have them now at Global, where they went to virtual sets and everything is lime green, and it's just this giant empty studio with a bunch of harsh lights. So when we switched over from a hard set, there was actually an etched Global Edmonton piece of glass, and as one of my going away presents, they took it out of the anchor desk. They had everybody sign the back of it, and then they framed it. So that's up in the background in my home office.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a cool keepsake.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's kind of like being at work in a way. But when you talk about how many studios I've been in a lot. And I will tell you what, this is one of the most professional looking studios that I've been in my career. And we're talking decades. So congratulations to you guys.
Shout out to Mark for that, because I had nothing to do with that.
Way to go, Mark, because this is amazing. I love it in here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to your broadcasting career, because I have a whole bunch of questions in regards to that.
Okay.
But let's start kind of where you grew up. Are you grew up in Canada? Are you from BC? Where did you grow up?
An Albertan, born and bred Albertan. So I was born in Edmonton, but my family grew up in Hinton, Alberta, which is right in the foothills close to Jasper. My dad ran a tire shop. My mom was a realtor. People said, oh my God, how could you live in Hinton? Because it's got a big pulp mill and it has the stench of a pulp mill, right? I said, it smells, it stinks there. I said, that's the smell of money, you know, the industry. So I grew up in a family where my relatives, my brothers worked at the mines and the mills and worked in the trades and those kinds of things. So I'm a small town gal who ended up back in Edmonton, and that was where my media career kind of began. Most of it there, and then ended up moving to Vancouver. So I've been here for about 15 years. It is my second go around because I went to BCIT in the 80s, so a long time ago, but mostly Alberta. I have a real fondness for all things Alberta, and it is going through some challenges right now, but yeah, it's a cool province. I love BC too, but Albertans are good, kind of hardworking, no BS, you know, common sense kind of people.
I lived 13 years in southern Alberta.
Oh, did you?
Right in the foothills, and it definitely has a beauty about it.
Yeah, oh my God, use the mountains when you're right up in the, there's something different about the mountains around Banff, Canmore than even Jasper, but when you're driving through them, and they're just so imposing and beautiful. And the funny thing is, a lot of people in BC think that Alberta is flat and boring and not that beautiful. And I'm like, have you been to the mountains? Have you seen the lakes? Have you been skiing? There's some of the most beautiful places in the world in Western Canada. So I'm lucky to have sort of straddled both the Alberta-BC experience.
So at what point did you go, you know, I'm going to get into broadcasting? Was that something you know, as, you know, high school age, or something you're like, this is what I want to do, or how did that come to be?
It was almost fluky, because the thing that I was successful at in school was the English, you know, the language, the story writing. Math, not so much. Math and science, Lynda, not so great at that. So I was interested in that, but I didn't see a career in it. And growing up in a super small town, because Hinton had a population of about 8,000 people, and I think still is in and around there, people would say, you could work in a bank, or you could get pregnant and get married and have a family. But no one said, you could be a TV news reporter. It just wasn't something that had ever been, you know, suggested to me as a possibility. So when I moved to Vancouver, my parents were living in Vancouver, and they had decided they had to go back to Edmonton. So they wanted me to come here to Vancouver, help them move, and Dad was going to stay in my apartment. And I thought, well, you know, okay, I'm going to do that. I was working in a bank, which I didn't necessarily love. When I got to Vancouver, I thought, oh my God, I love it here. I think I might stay. So I stayed, but then I thought, what am I going to do? I'm a teenager. I don't really feel motivated or driven in a specific career path. So my parents said, oh, interestingly, the BC government, the apprenticeship board was offering a series of aptitude testing for people who were in between jobs or looking for some sort of direction. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that. 3 8-hour days of writing aptitude tests and meeting with psychologists. It's incredible that the government paid for that. And they said, okay, give us a week and we're going to crunch all the numbers and then we're going to give you 5 professions that we guarantee success for you in. So I went back and I thought, okay, whatever. My number one was broadcast journalism. And I remember as an 18-year-old going, what is that? You know, what do you mean? What is broadcast journalism? And when they explained why it made sense for me, I thought, oh, okay. They said, you're someone who doesn't like, you know, to do the same thing every day. You don't like to have a boss over your shoulder, do this, do that. You like to write. You like to be around other people. You're really curious. There were a bunch of reasons that they said made sense. So I started looking into BCIT and the broadcast journalism program. Went for a couple of sessions, actually got accepted. And I remember my first class at BCIT and I sat down and I remember having like an epiphany in my, you know, underdeveloped teenage brain that this is exactly where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing. And I have never regretted it since. There have been a couple of days, you know, the odd day here and there that I didn't love my job so much. But generally speaking, I've had a blast and I would have done it almost for free.
Mm-hmm. So you came out of that course. How long did it take you to find employment after that? Was like,
well, this is going to sound funny because this is not the way things work anymore. But I was in the beginning of my second year, and one of our instructors was the news director at a local TV station. And so I went up to him after class and I said, can I volunteer? Can I do anything for free? Can I hang around the newsroom? I want to suck it in. I want to be around the people who are in this business. And he said, well, you know, we have a staff association and they won't let you actually touch anything because they'd be mad about that, but you can come in and observe. And I was like, I'll take it. So I went in and they had me observing the researcher. So hello, that's kind of like watching paint dry, but just to be in the vibe and the newsroom and the energy and the journalists and the camera guys and breaking news. And I just thought this was super cool. So I would go in and I would just sit there and soak it all in. And one day the assignment editor was looking around, something had happened and they pointed, they said, Steele, you get out with the cameraman. And I was like, me? Yeah, whoa, I will go. And I remember being in the car. This was a station at the time that was called CKVU, which then became UTV and VU13, and then it was Global, and now it's City TV. So it goes back that far. But I remember just being thrilled. It was, I can't believe I'm in a camera vehicle. And I'm looking by as we're driving by people, and I'm thinking, they're looking at me because they're thinking, oh, there might be someone we recognize in there. Of course, not me. But I was essentially a mic stand because they needed me to do some streeters or something. I was just ecstatic. But apparently, as soon as I'd left the newsroom, somebody walked in and said, where's Steele? Oh, she's out with the cameraman. Oh, no, the staff association was incensed. They had gone and filed a formal complaint. By the time I got back, unbeknownst to me, all this chaos is happening. By the time I walked in the door, I was on the payroll because they had to do it. Otherwise, they were going to have some sort of a semi-union complaint. Mm-hmm. And I ended up working for them, and I ended up getting called in 5 days a week to be a reporter, which is ridiculous because I had no idea what I was doing. And I was reporting for the 6 o'clock news at the beginning of my second year of BCIT. And finally, I was missing so many classes that other students went to the instructor and said, you got to kick her out because she's missing classes. And he said, but the whole point of going to school is to get a job. So let's try to work this out. And they gave me a co-op deal where I could do my courses and tests and what have you by correspondence, but I worked full time. So I really only went to BCIT for about a year and was working in a major market TV station, which I will be the first person to admit I, did not know what I was doing, but man, I had passion and I had a work ethic and the curiosity and I really wanted to do it. So I was lucky. That doesn't happen anymore.
You came back to class as a celebrity, and they're probably like,
Well,
there's probably some jealousy wrapped up in there.
That's what it was, right? And so there were people, because we were all trying to find our way, and there were some students who had a nose at a joint, like, well, how come she's doing that? It was like, well, you know what? Get out there yourself and go knock on some doors at the radio stations and whatever, and just see if you can make something happen. You can't just be bitchy about it when someone else gets ahead.
Apprentices that are listening, Lynda just gave a good piece of advice there. Volunteer.
Yes.
Get out. Be a part of it. Just being there is going to open doors and make things happen for you.
The thing is that, especially in this job market, no matter what your profession is, there are 100 other people who are also knocking on the door. And you have to find a way to set yourself apart. And if your way of doing that is just to say, hey, man, I've got the initiative. I'm going to put in the work. I don't mind not getting a lunch break. I'm just going to soak up every single thing I can here and show my passion for it, then you'll maybe, not always, but you'll maybe be noticed. And someone goes, hey, maybe we'll put Steele next in line, you know? Some people are just lucky and they get there without having done anything to get there. Yep. But these days you have to help yourself, I think, a little bit.
We've had apprentices where we tell kind of a similar thing. We're like, you know, make sure you're ready to go to work. Your job ready. You got everything, you know, all the training in place. Like you're ready to go. And we had a apprentice. We were like, call some of the contractors, drop off some resumes, you know, be out there in person. And we had one individual, he dropped off a resume somewhere and they called him back and they're like, if you can get here in 30 minutes, we'll give you an interview.
Oh, wow.
And so he's like, I wasn't like dressed. He's like, I put on a nice shirt. He's like, I don't have a car, so I caught an Uber.
Yeah.
And he made it there in time. And I think almost to the surprise of the contractor, because I think maybe this young guy won't make it, and he's still working there. And he's so it's just one of those things. You if you're gonna put it out there and you're gonna hustle.
And you know what they say, that luck is preparation meeting opportunity. You have to be ready for it. You have to be willing. You have to go the extra mile. You have to step up. Yep. It's not enough to just be one of a sea of people, because they'll pick someone else.
So at what point did you so you started out as the mic stand, and then now you're doing that kind of, I'm guessing, in the field interviews, is that kind of thing? And then at what point you're like, here, Lynda, this
is the TV anchor?
This is your desk.
You know what? When I first got into TV news, nobody wanted to be the anchor. And I know that sounds weird now because everyone thinks, oh, but the anchor makes all the money and you're famous and you get a good table in a restaurant. That was not what anybody wanted when I got into the business. People they were interested in journalism. They were interested in meeting newsmakers and having a front row seat to, what was going on in the world and just being there for big events and learning. And being the anchor, sure, there's advantages to that, but that was just not that appealing. So for me, I ended up doing it because my husband was in policing. And so he was really going up the food chain and getting promoted. And in policing, if you're a sergeant for the Vancouver Police Department, you can't just walk over and become a sergeant at the Surrey Police Department. It's all kind of, you have to already be within the system and then you have to wait your turn and what have you. So it didn't make sense for us to move for my job because he would essentially be starting over. And that didn't seem fair. He didn't say he wouldn't do it, but I thought, okay, I'm going to find ways to be as engaged as possible and keep learning within the confines of staying in one market. And so I had done, the reporting, I'd done the producing, I'd done documentaries, blah, blah, blah. What had I not done? That was sitting on the anchor desk, and it was something that I could put my focus on and learn to be better at that. So I can't even remember the question anymore, but it wasn't that I sat down on the desk and thought, look at me, I'm a TV anchor. It was more just a natural progression of, okay, we're going to make my personal work with my professional, and this is the thing that makes the most sense. Yeah.
So what were some of the, surprises or things you came across once you got that role?
That's an interesting question. I think that the surprise for a lot of people is that they think when you're anchoring that you're all about the hair and the makeup and the hairspray and your little anchor blazer and what have you. And the reality is that there's a lot of hard work that's going on behind the scenes where you're mentoring the younger reporters, you're writing, you're producing, you're dealing with camera guys and the assignment desk and what have you. And then you're fine-tuning your own scripts. preparing for a live interview maybe, and then the getting ready for the show was literally like the last 10 minutes before you popped on the air. So I'd be in a bathroom with the meteorologist, and we'd be both putting on makeup in crappy lighting and people going to the bathroom behind you. So it wasn't really particularly very glamorous in reality. So I think a lot of people thought that the anchor was just, fed grapes and fanned and what have you throughout the day. A good TV anchor is a newsroom leader and someone who people look up to, someone who people come to and ask you to be a mentor for them. And I took that role really seriously. And what's really cool about it is a lot of the younger women in particular that I mentored who came to me who were, 10 years behind me in my career or more, I'm still friends with them now. And a lot of them have actually moved to Vancouver. And so you have this real intimate relationship with someone that you were there for them when they needed it. And then it's weird because you're not doing it because you think, oh, they're going to give back to me or they owe me one or something. But it could be like 15 years later and that person ends up doing something unexpected for you, where you're maybe, when I came to this market, there were some younger journalists I used to work with in Alberta who were at CTV Vancouver where I was applying. And there, it's like, the cycle of goodwill, and they're going into the news director's office and saying, take Steele. She's got a great work ethic. She gets along with people. She's really good at what she does. And so everybody's kind of floating each other's boat, and I think that you have to remember what they say, that, when you're on the way up in the elevator, you got to remember that you got to be nice to people, because someday you're going to be on your way down in the elevator and those people are going to be going up and they could say, hey, to hell with you. You were ignorant to me or you didn't help me. And so I think journalism is just such an awesome team sport in a way that you have to get along, you have to go along to get along in some ways, but it just really is about relationships and helping each other.
Well, it speaks a lot to your leadership, right? I'm sure you probably have a leadership style that obviously worked for you in the room, right? So we see it on the job site, to tie it back. It's, you got the journey person that's, training the apprentices and bringing them up. And then, especially in our environment, that apprentice might be your boss or foreperson at some point, right? It's just the way the world works, right? But your kindness and willingness to, share your craft, as you will, that helps mentor those individuals, and they'll pay that forward at some point as well.
Bottom line is that it doesn't take a lot to lend a hand to someone else, especially if they're passionate about the same thing you are. That's fun to help them explore their greatest potential. And I also think, I don't remember having it myself, frankly, and maybe that was just me being, thrust into this high-paced, kind of scary and incredibly exciting job. I don't know if I wanted to go sort of admit to someone that I had absolutely no idea what a nomination meeting was. It was like, okay, I'll take that assignment. What the hell is that? And we'd try to figure it out going out the door. I don't remember having any female mentors. There was a lot of competitiveness. But back in the day when I started, there also weren't a ton of women in the industry. And I think that just inherently made women maybe a little bit more competitive of each other. There were fewer jobs that they were competing for. But I don't know, everybody's just looking to get ahead. And I feel like it's your job, regardless of whether you're the anchor or the foreman or whatever you're doing, is to essentially model good behavior and to be the kind of best version of whatever your industry, puts up on a pedestal, so that people can say, yeah, I want to be like that. I like that. I like the fact that you're walking the talk, and that you're not just putting on my hairspray, and sitting down and expecting everyone else to do all the work. You're rolling up the sleeves and you're writing the scripts, and you're doing the interviews, and you're excited when there's breaking news, and you're standing around, the editing bay. Some anchors are just like, oh, how's my hair? And others are working anchors. And I saw myself as a working journalist.
Well, I see that environment at certain times could be like, you could be anxious. Like it's so 6 o'clock news, you can report on something that happened on the morning commute or what's going on, just, politics or local, whatever's happening. But a lot of news is like happening. So, if it's happening, it's like you're rolling into it. You're kind of like baptism by fire, just stuff coming at you, right?
Some of the stuff is weird too, because I was the police reporter for a couple of years, and I remember being at a scene. There had been a murder somewhere, and it was still fairly dark. I think it was fairly early in the morning, and I had just arrived at the scene, and I saw that the media relations person was standing over by some police officers. So I made my way over there, and I was saying, "What's going on here?" And she was like, she kind of points down. I'm like, what? I looked down, and the body was right there, and I was almost stepping on it, and I didn't mean to encroach on the crime scene. I didn't even see the body there. So you think later, there's some strange circumstances that you get into, where I gave a speech one time to these Edmonton police women were having a conference or something, and they had different guest speakers. So I remember a friend of mine was in one of the other rooms and heard some of these police women say, "Well, I'm not signing up for Steele's thing. Who cares? I don't care about the media." And somebody else said, "No, she's really good. You might find it interesting." So this particular policewoman came and she sat there with her arms crossed, like, "Okay,
let's hear
what
it.
is this dumbass from TV got to say?" And sorry, I'm swearing. It's my bad potty mouth from media, from decades of it. But at the end of it, she walked up to me and said, "Okay, do you guys have an employee assistance program?" And I said, "No, we didn't at the time." And she said, "Because it occurred to me after listening to you talk for an hour that you go to all the same things I go to. Maybe not as hands-on as the police officer who's literally got to, put somebody in a body bag kind of thing." But she said, it did not occur to me that our jobs have a parallel and that you're seeing a lot of crazy stuff too that can impact you. And you're doing your job. When you're out there, people say, "Oh, how can you not just fall apart because you see a child has died in a car accident?" It was like, because I'm doing a job right now, and my job is to get through this professionally, get all the elements I need, deliver the story. Then when I get home, I don't feel so good about it. But yeah, I mean, some of the things that you're exposed to, both exciting and terrible and sad and whatever. I mean, I got a chance to go to Ukraine, and we flew in the tail of the Soviet Antonov, which was built to carry their space shuttle, a massive plane that was essentially filled with relief supplies for people in Ukraine. And got to spend 2 weeks in Ukraine and traveling around and interpreters and stuff. I mean, the job has given me so much access to people and experiences that I would have never had. It's like being a combination of a paramedic and a school teacher and a politician and all these different careers all melded into one, because you're a jack of all trades. You know a little bit about a lot of things, not a ton about one specific thing, but you have a story to tell.
Well, as a young, 18, 19-year-old coming into this, it probably never crossed your mind that, critical incident stress might be part of the job, right?
No.
That's not even something that's even in your realm, right?
No, and I don't know if you need to have a certain kind of resilience. I obviously feel empathy for people in situations, and I feel horror or I'm happy or whatever. I have all the same emotions that a normal person would have. But over time, you do get a little bit desensitized. I remember one night doing a whole ride-along. We were doing a documentary on the forensic unit at the police department. And so they were trying to direct the best police calls to the unit that I was with so we could get the best footage and what have you. And just some of the stuff that we saw and that we did, it was just so bananas. We took a benign call 4 o'clock in the morning to a house that there'd been a break-in. And the story had been that the mailman saw somebody laying on the front, foyer, bleeding and everything, and they called the police. And so we are now coming because they're trying to figure out, was the person assaulted? Is the suspect still around? And I'm with 2 police officers, and we're going around the house at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they've got flashlights, and the one guy gets us in the front. "Hey, come on, I'm in the front." And we go in, and it stunk. It was sort of like almost a rooming house sort of thing. And there was blood smeared all over the walls and the floor like a horror movie. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm kind of looking around, and there was tattered, yellowed porn taped to the walls, old pictures and stuff. And so I'm just kind of observing this. And all of a sudden, one of the police officers went to walk up the stairs to check it out, and he starts yelling, "John, get up here right now!" And I'm like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" I'm thinking, do I stay down here by myself, or am I going to run up behind this police officer where there's something going on? And I made a decision. I'm going with him because he's got a gun and I don't. And we get around the corner of the stairwell, and the police officer is wrestling a man with a gun, with a handgun. He's trying to get it away from him, and I'm just up against the wall thinking, what is going on? The backstory was that there was an older man who lived in the house. He lived with a roommate, and the roommate was going to rob him. And so he was in this roommate's drawer stealing things, and the guy came in and, confronted him. He turned around, had a handgun, shot the guy, shot him in the head. The bullet came out the other side, but it was a small, handgun. So the guy staggers his way down the stairwell with smearing blood everywhere and falls in the foyer, bleeding out. Well, this roommate just steps over him and continues just doing his business. And so when we got there, the roommate who was deaf, I think, was in sort of rooting around for stuff, and the policeman approached him, and this guy whipped around. He still had this little gun. And so it was just crazy stuff. You're just kind of going, okay, what other job would you have that experience at?
Not many. Not any of the jobs I've had.
How'd you like that?
Yeah, that's not covering the local, the local 4-H.
School board, yeah, exactly.
That's and I imagine the stories of stuff you come because it's just day to day. Part of that is you seem to have a really good outlook on it, but you can become jaded after seeing, because the news is how you put it out and how it's, of the news is facts.
Yeah.
Right. And I think prior days, the news was probably clearer facts.
Oh, we could have a conversation about that.
But, yourself, not everything goes on the news. Not everything you saw or were part of their, I'm sure there's some stuff what? We'll skip that one, right? Mm. But, you get to see all of it. So you kind of see you have this different lens, if you will.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it does sort of desensitize you to some degree. But the reality is that you have a relationship as a broadcaster, whether it is, you're a radio host or if you're a TV reporter or anchor. You have a relationship with the people who have invited you into their home, often at intimate times. Sometimes people watch the news in their pajamas from bed. Sometimes they're peeling the carrots and getting things ready, and the kids are running around and they're watching the news. But they have made a choice because they can pick station A, B, or C. And if they've chosen your station and they get, tune you in every day at a certain time, they're developing a relationship with you. They, over time, in the beginning, nobody ever likes change. So if you're a new host, they don't like you. I don't like her. She's terrible. I don't like her voice. I don't like the way she dresses. Her hair is awful, blah, blah, bitch. And then, maybe about 6 months later, they're like, she's really growing on me and I kind of, like her. And then 10 years later, they're like, oh my God, I have been invited, I kid you not, to MC people's weddings because they think I'm such a key part of their family and they feel like they really know me. And they do to some degree. I mean, the news, because it's TV news, is very scripted, with the exception of the ad libs with your weather and sports and what have you. But generally speaking, people would say to me, do you guys really like each other that much, or is it an act when they're talking about your co-host? And I'm like, you know what? I'm not Meryl Streep, and you've been watching the show for a long time, so what you see is what you get, and that is me. And yeah, we do really like each other. It's like being married. It was my co-host, Gord, was like my TV husband. In fact, my nephew, when he was very little, who was still confused about why is Auntie Lynda on TV, and he didn't really get it. And my brother was saying, Auntie Lynda and Uncle Norm are coming over for dinner. And he said, he said, Gord's coming for, he said Auntie Lynda and her husband, I think he said. He said, Gord's coming over? And they said, no, Uncle Norm. Yeah. He said, what? And he was confused. And they said, no, Lynda's married to Uncle Norm. She's not married to Gord. And my little nephew went, does Gord know? So, I mean, if this is in your own family, people just get used to seeing you. And so my point in saying that is that you have an obligation and a relationship to be honest and fair and decent and also very authentic. People can sniff out a phony 100 miles away.
Yeah, well, you can have the teleprompter, or you can have your notes or whatever, but like your personality is your personality.
Yeah.
I think that's something, in everyone. That's something hard to, fake or have, like, if you started from day one and you're like, I'm going to be this persona.
Right.
That's hard to maintain, right? So your personality is your personality.
Exactly. And back in the day when I first started, the TV industry was, as I mentioned, more about journalism, more about news gathering, less about personalities and ratings. And there was a cast of characters. You didn't have to be model beautiful. You didn't have to be perfect. You just had to be good at your job, and you could be on TV. So there were characters. Oh my God, the weather guy that we had, he was not a meteorologist. He was a weather presenter. He was beloved. I don't know what era you were in, Alberta, but his name was Bill Matheson. And he was colorful, and he had badly dyed hair, and he had really cheap suits, and he had a stick that he liked to bang at the end of his weathercast, and he would go, and that's the weather for whatever. People loved Bill Matheson. Mm-hmm. And the sadness is that a Bill Matheson probably wouldn't get the weather job these days because they're so afraid of making a mistake. They want the ratings. Everybody wants to be number one. We have to sort of pick a whole bunch of cookie cutter people. All the women have to look a certain way and the guys have to look like, it's a Ken and Barbie show. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, I've always said, if you've got 3-4 TV stations in a market, we're all selling widgets. If we're all selling green widgets, why are you buying mine? Because the only difference, really, generally speaking, from newscasts are the people who are presenting it, who you get to know and you decide whether you like them or trust them or tolerate them, kind of thing. So I'm a little sad these days that they've gotten so generic, and I kind of feel like the media industry has been its own worst enemy for the last 20 years, which is why it's, in the moment, kind of circling the drain a little bit. I feel like it'll kind of blow itself up and start over again and be relevant, but right now it's tricky times.
Yeah, it'll probably pivot at some point. You see, if you're clicking down the channels, right, and it's news hour, right? So you're going, and it's like, it's hard to see one show where it's like, oh, that's different, because really,
exactly, it all looks the same.
The set looks the same, the people are, it's just, if you're not, it's like almost you don't see the faces. You're like, oh yeah, it's just two newscasters, or whatever you're going through. It's just, so it's like, oh, we'll pick one, right?
And the thing is that they don't give the audience enough credit. So when I was at CTV Vancouver in their zeal to, challenge Global for the ratings supremacy, they were trying anything that the American consultants would tell them. And Canada is not America, and there are different audiences who are looking for different things. So that's their first problem. But they decided in that era that everything had to be breaking. Is everything breaking news, breaking local news? And so they would say that anything was breaking. It could have happened the night before, but breaking tonight. And I was like, what you're missing here is that the public is not stupid, and not everything can be breaking. And if you say, it's like crying wolf. If you say everything's breaking, then nothing is breaking. And so instead of really catching people's attention, like, oh my God, this is breaking, you think, oh my God, it's CTV and everything is breaking. So they did interesting research at the time where they wanted the audience in these focus groups to explain, if you had to describe global BC, what as a house or whatever, what would it look like? What do you picture? And they said, Global is like a pioneer cabin with big logs, and it's got a big fireplace going, and it's warm, and it's lived in, and it's comfortable, and I like it. It was like, okay, what about CTV? Oh, they said CTV is like a glass office tower. It's all steel and metal and slick. And without even really understanding it, I think what they were saying is, I like the vibe of the Global newscast better because it's more down to earth. It's more comfortable.
It's more
whereas
cozy.
CTV was breaking, everything is break, and they were trying too hard to be slick and American, and people were like, I'm not into that,
Oh, there he is.
Oh, Bill Matheson. He was so, that in that picture of Bill Matheson was on his retirement night. And we had the police pipe band came in. We had all these special guests. Behind him was his weather map. And even though there was the technology to do everything computerized, he was old school. So he would do it with a black felt pen and his stick that he would bang. And so at his last weather forecast, they had raised his plexiglass weather map up to the ceiling. It was like, don, 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 don. It was all very exciting. And the funny thing was that when we looked at the show back later, because we had all kinds of special guests coming and going and in the studio and whatever, there were two total strangers, just viewers who'd somehow made their way into the station. And they were standing right behind me and Gord, my co-host, leaning against part of the set, watching in the background. We were like, who are those two women behind Lynda and Gord? They were just viewers who managed to sort of wander in and find their way. Anyway, that last time I was at Global, his weather map is still positioned right outside the studio.
Like retired, like hanging in Jersey.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
and the
super
sadness actually was that the reason that he had to step out finally was because there was starting to be some things, because he was always quirky, but they were thinking something's going on with Bill. And anyway, a long story short, it turned out he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he didn't want to tell station management because he didn't want them to say, you're going to have to quit. So the thing is that people loved him. And when he ended up going into long-term care in Lethbridge in southern Alberta, he hadn't been good with saving his money, which is another reason why he was reluctant to quit. But they, when the care home found out that he could only afford like a single room kind of, or like a shared room with someone, they said, it's Bill Matheson. He was so iconic.
That's awesome.
They upgraded him to his own fancy suite at the lower rate because people just loved him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
He's in the home doing the local weather with his
probably
his new roommates.
Right?
Yeah, living his best life.
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So at some point, did you work in radio as well?
Yes. So the one thing I hadn't really done when I was in Edmonton, I had done, TV reporting, documentaries, producing, anchoring. I was writing for the Edmonton Journal for about 3 years. I wrote a lifestyle column just to sort of learn, keep the chops up, learn a different version of media. And the one thing I had never done was radio. So when my husband got transferred to Vancouver, I went back into reporting and did Steele on Your Side at CTV Vancouver, which was great. But it was not challenging enough for me, and I wanted to really keep the learning curve going. So when the CKNW started posting for an afternoon drive host, I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I could do that, And so I took that job in 2015, and I don't regret it at all. But I will tell you, that is the hardest job I've ever had. The shows were 4 hours long. There was almost no resources. I had a very young, early 20s producer, and it was like running a marathon every day. And I realized how much in an unscripted show where you feel like you're walking on a tightrope with no net, that you are literally relying on your own wit and figuring it out and having to know instantly who's the mayor of Port Coquitlam or whatever. And because I'd only been in Edmonton for a couple of years and I had been focusing more on consumer news versus sort of general stuff, I realized that everything was kind of a big deep dive for me. So being in radio was like flying a rocket ship. You had computer screens everywhere with times and, different things, and your audio's over here and the phone board's there and all this stuff is happening, and your computer with your lineup and your computer where you can Google stuff secretly while you're on the air. And there's just, you're like pushing buttons and dealing with stuff, and messages are coming in and you can see your audio operator through a window and you're kind of gesturing to each other and doing things. And man, I would trudge my way home just out of gas every single day. Yeah. It really didn't ever get easy. Tear in your eye
while you're getting a glass of wine. You're like, what was that?
Right? You're just like, holy crap. It was one of the most fun times in my career and one of the most stressful times as well.
And was it morning news that you did?
No, I did the afternoon show. Okay. So at the time it was 2 to 6. Yeah, and so for me, because I'm also like, my brain is sparking with 1,000 ideas. Oh, we could talk to this, we could do that. So from the second I would wake up in the morning on my iPhone, on my computer, and we'll get this, blah, blah, blah. So it kind of felt like I was doing the show for 14 hours a day because you never turned it off.
Yeah, because you're whatever you can, resources and whatever you can put together you're building the show for yourself.
Right, and a lot of it too was just really observing. So almost every day that I would walk to work, I would see something. What's going on over there? Or what are they doing there? And that could lead to something else. Or it's another idea. And You know, so a lot of it had to just be really present, really interested. Who would be a good guest for that? And so at some point, it's just like, oh my God, I'm so tired.
Did you ever think about, like, you know, lack of a better term, like genre, so you're reporting daily,
Right?
Are you aware to not kind of get stuck in a niche so that you're kind of reporting on the same types of things over and over, like?
Well, that wasn't necessarily a problem. I mean, I had things subject areas that I was maybe more interested in. So sure, you'd maybe tap that more often. But it was just like, you know, a kaleidoscope, a spinning wheel of things. And like, and now we're talking China, and now we're talking about AIDS. And over here, now there's a big fire or breaking news. And it was just changing, which I kind of like, because I am a bit of a squirrel and I'm super interested in what's going on around the world. And I like doing different things. I don't like tapping into the exact same subject. That would bore me to death. I need stimulation, and I need to be around other people. But I had to do the show during the pandemic from my condo, which was not fun. And I remember just finishing the show one day. The CKNW studio was on the 21st floor of the TD Tower downtown. And I got out of my show and I'm trudging to my desk. I'm tired. And I see all these cases of equipment by my desk and a note on the top saying, as of tomorrow, you're doing the show from home. And here's just a schematic of how to set up your own radio studio. And I was like, what? You mistake me for someone who is, you know, like, I'm a Luddite practically. I'm going to set up a whole radio studio? This is nuts.
Stand by for technical difficulties.
Well, in fact, yes. So one time I remember interviewing EB live. He was not the premier then, he was the Attorney General. And I was just hitting a commercial break. We were taking phone calls with EB, and I'm just sitting there just taking a breath, and I'm looking at my iPhone, and my board op, who was actually back at the station, texted me and said, what's going on with you? And I was like, what do you mean? He said, we're coming back right away. He said, you're off air. You have no Wi-Fi. I was like, what? And he'd been, I was like, what do you mean? And what should I do? And he said, we're coming back. Just do it on your iPhone. And we had these apps that if you were broadcasting from the field, you could use this app, and the quality was a bit better. Do that. And I was thinking, what? Now I looked at my iPhone and it was almost dead. And my husband had just come home from work. I heard the door open. I was like, get me a power cord. It was like, and you got 30 seconds. And I'm like starting, the cortisol is coming out of my ears. And I'm trying to plug in my phone to the back of the computer with a short cable. So now I'm leaning over in an awkward position, trying to pretend that everything is cool. And we're back now with Attorney General David Eby. And meanwhile, I'm freaking out because I don't have a lineup. I can't talk to anyone in the studio. I don't know who's calling in. I don't have any information about anything. It's all dead. Anyway, it turns out that Shaw had cut my cable. It was a semi-prearranged thing that they were going to switch me over to something, and I kept saying, you cannot do it arbitrarily. You have to let me know when you're doing it, because I'm doing a live radio show. So you can't, oh yeah, no problem. Some guy just, cuts off my Wi-Fi.
Sounds like espionage.
Right? It felt like it too. And then when my neighbor had some home renos, and I'm on the middle of the show, and then here we are, drilling coming. It was like, what is going on? A commercial break, and I'm running, banging on the door. Some guy opens the door. He's got a mask on. He was like, what? I said, I am doing a radio show right next door. And he said, I don't care.
Yeah, not my problem.
See you later. I was like, oh my God. So yeah, 4 months of doing my show from home, that almost did me in.
Yeah, those were different times. I'm sure we could do a whole segment just on, COVID work from home, right?
Oh yeah.
Lessons learned.
And every day at 3:00, Dr. Bonnie Henry would come out with her COVID update, which in the beginning we were all just like on tenterhooks. Wait, what is Dr. Bonnie going to say? And how many people died? And oh my God, what's the numbers? But it would come up at 3:00, or it was supposed to be at 3. In radio, everything is minute to minute. Everything is planned out. And when you're hitting commercials, there's no wiggle room. I mean, there might be a 10 seconds or maybe 30 seconds, but you're not screwing around with that wheel. And so they didn't get that in government. And we'd be like, okay, 3:00, where is she? She's not there. And you're ad-libbing and you can't book a guest because you're waiting for Dr. Bonnie. Sometimes they would be 10 minutes late, and I am dying ad-libbing and
longest
tap dancing
10 minutes of your life.
For 10 minutes. finally, one time I just thought, oh, to hell with it. And I emailed Adrian Dix, who was health minister, and I just said, hey, minister, is there any way that when you guys are doing your thing at 3 that you could actually try to do it at 3? Because you've got media all over the province who are on a clock, and when you are kind of hooping us over by whatever you're doing. And he was like, I had no idea. And so they tried to make it a little bit closer, but.
Which makes sense. They would work with, because the media is the one putting out the message, right? Like.
Well, yeah. I mean, Dr. Henry at the time, in the early going of the pandemic, everybody thought Dr. Bonnie Henry was a hero because she was helping us steer us through this really super scary, deadly pandemic. And then as we kind of kept going, and then there were the more restrictions in the masks, and you can't fly, and now you can't go to a restaurant, or you have to have a passport, or whatever we called those things at the time. People started getting really mad. So Dr. Bonnie Henry would come on or say something, and people would be emailing you, I hate her, got like death threats for Dr. It was like, oh man, people, chill out. It was like there was this whole cohort of society who thought government was trying to control them. So I'm going to make sure you can't do anything that you want to do and I'm like, yeah, because why? Why would government want to crash the economy? No, they were trying, did they make mistakes? For sure. Did I agree with everything they did? No. But to this day, Dr. Bonnie Henry's still getting death threats, and I think she still has an RCMP escort who has to go with her when she just goes for a jog, because there are people who hate her guts. And I was thinking, what is wrong with the world? People need to chill out, you know?
Yeah, well, sometimes what you like that's a whole other part of your job too. Like, you're kind of an ambassador for the news. You're this person that everyone looks up to, everyone sees day to day, whatever. Do you ever get people, like, did you have people that were like frequent callers of the show, or like you'd have your kind of regulars?
And you knew which ones were good, and you knew which ones were like, oh, we'll just leave that guy at the bottom because he was a little bit crazy. But yeah, I mean, you got to know people. The thing with talk radio that was interesting, so in TV, when you're on air, people will attack your appearance. Oh, she looks fat. That you tell Lynda Steele that lipstick is awful. You tell Lynda Steele that, she should never wear that dress again. Bitch, whatever. In radio, it was about your intellect. Oh, you're an idiot. You have stupid opinions. You shouldn't have a show because you're a woman. Because they can't, they're not fixating here. Yeah. Because I have a low raspy voice, which I've had since I was a child, I would have some haters like, she sounds like she's an 85-year-old woman, get her off the air, she's terrible. And so you get this vitriol in the beginning. People I'd get up in the morning, I'm so tired, I'm like, oh, I look at my iPhone, and there's some email that's like this long from some 60-something dude going, you're going to be fired. I hate you. Everyone I know hates you. And you're just like, oh, God, like, what is wrong with people? And then at the end of the 6-year term when I stepped out, people were emailing me, people I'd never heard from, people who would say, how they say, first time, long time listener, first time caller. Yep. There were a lot of people who said, I listen to your show every day. And I've never called in, I've never contacted you, I've never emailed you, but I heard you're leaving and I want to tell you this. Oh my God, it was just really heartwarming. People would say things like, I didn't agree with everything you said. Sometimes I would be mad at something you said, but I always thought what you said was interesting, and I thought you were open-minded. And this one guy said, I would get home, and every day for dinner, we would talk about something that was on your show, and that would be the family discussion. And they would also, and I just thought stuff like that, that there were normal, decent, supportive people lying in the weeds who you didn't even know were listening, because you only hear from the loud ones. You hear from the ones who love you, which is sometimes creepy, because that's weird. You don't know me, you shouldn't love me that much. Or you hear from the ones who hate your guts. And that's weird too, because you don't know me and you shouldn't hate my guts. So most people are in the middle, and they're listening, and they're benign, and sometimes they like it and sometimes they don't, but they don't feel the need to, jam it down your throat. So to hear from people who decided at that time to reach out and tell me what they thought was really heartwarming, and also a little bit sad, because I thought, man, I wish in a way that I knew then that there was a little bit more softness out there, because it was often, the demographic for talk radio was white guys in their mid-50s who leaned right. nothing wrong with that, but that was that demographic. So it was kind of like being in an echo chamber on the phone lines that you would hear these people. We didn't find out until later that there were tons of women listening, but they were afraid to call in because every time people called in, they were yelling and being an aggressive dude, pounding their chest. And women thought, well, I don't want to, you know. And for a while I had a co-host, Drex, who was really talented, but he was also very acerbic often. And if someone called in and he didn't like what they had to say, he would basically tell them to screw off and hang up on them on air. And I would give him hell in the commercial break saying, you know what? You can't say, hey, give us a call, and then freak out on someone and hang up on them. The idea is you can say, you know what? You don't attack the person, you can attack the idea.
Yep.
But he was more, you know, so we grew a cross-section of people that I didn't fully know were there until I was leaving.
Yeah.
But that's the way life is, right? People don't tell you what they think of you until you're gone.
Yeah, oftentimes.
Right?
It's a neat thing because for one, you don't want everyone to agree with your opinion. If every single person agrees with
that would be boring.
Yeah, you need a different circle because that's what makes any organization, anything what it is people. You could talk about a subject and people can have different opinions or different views, and those can be based on all kinds of things, you know, upbringing or just their purview. You know, the way I see something and the way you see it are two totally different, you know, views, right? And that discussion and that open kind of dialogue is what makes things grow and makes things better oftentimes.
And you're so right, because for me, coming in from Alberta, there were things, Vancouver is a very different city than Edmonton. And there were things I hadn't been exposed to yet that I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. So, for example, you know, Insight, the safe injection site in the downtown east side, Edmonton didn't have any of those at the time. And so that was new to me. And I wasn't like opposed to it. I just kind of thought, wow, there's a place where people go and they inject heroin. And they were like, yeah, I think there was about, at the time, 750 people a day going through Insight, which isn't a very big building. And I remember just thinking, wow, I wish that people who went in the door shut behind them, and then they opened another door and they said, can we help you with rehabilitation, or what do you need to help get you, whatever. And so I was trying to be honest, because that was just something I was just trying to work through in my head. And then people would phone in, well, you should go back to Alberta then, you know. So I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just saying this is new and you're used to it. For me, being exposed to so many different ideas and so many different people really moved my individual yardsticks on what I thought about things, and even my own politics. Because I interviewed a drag queen one time who did those drag time story times that were being protested. And the queen said to me, you know, it's hard to hate up close. And I thought, oh, that's good. I think that really people are angry about things or suspicious or they don't agree with them because they haven't been exposed to more information and more people just to talk it through. Yep. And I didn't always change my opinion. I mean, I didn't get to the end of it and go, oh, you're right, I suddenly believe that every woman should have 6 kids or whatever. But I was open-minded. I learned a lot, and that's what I loved about radio. And when I came out the other end, I felt like I was a more well-rounded person who was more open-minded than when I went in.
Yeah, it's I lived in Alberta for a long period of time, and just like, you know, Alberta to BC or just you pick anywhere in Canada. But even like in BC, you know, there's rural BC, there's the lower mainland in Vancouver as it is, or the, you know, the greater Vancouver area. It's just, there's so much diversity. There's diversity in landscape, there's diversity in culture, there's just everything. And so
income.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You could see $1,000 car and $1 million car just sitting at the same traffic light, right? And it's just a different place, right? And so it's an eye opener for a lot of people when they move here. I grew up on the island, and I remember the first time coming to the city, and I was like, this is the big city. Like, this is wow, right? It's a different place.
Yeah, because if you walk down Alberni Street and you see Tiffany's and there's a Maserati parked outside, if you weren't from here, you could think, oh man, everybody who lives in Vancouver is super rich. It was like, no, actually, there are some people, there is that 1% or whatever, who can live in the super fancy penthouse condos and drive the fancy cars. But generally speaking, a lot of people are kind of struggling just to pay the mortgage and the rent, and we pay for the beauty of being around the mountains and the ocean and living in a fabulous city. But it is, I had a friend at CTV here who was offered a job in Edmonton as the anchor, and said, I don't want to go to Edmonton. Like, I'm in Vancouver. I said, well, if you're not done with media yet, because he was thinking about getting out of the business, I said, take it, because Edmonton is such a good market. It's a big city. I mean, I see there now like about 1.4, 1.5 million. It's so affordable compared to Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
I said, you're going to love it. You go to a number one station. You got a lot of ability to get all the big gets. The premier will say yes because you work for the number one station. So he took the job and he just said to me, oh, my God. He said they bought a house, cash, paid it off. I think he paid like $500,000 for this massive house with a 4-car garage. He just said it's incredible to have no debt and to be living in a place where the commute from one end of the city to the other might be a half an hour kind of thing. So each city has its ups and downs.
The house even came with 3 snow shovels.
Right? Exactly. That was the downside.
Half a bag of ice melt.
Right.
So of radio, the different TV stuff you've done, news stuff, what's been like the one that's been like, this is like your favorite, or the thing where you're like this is what I enjoyed, or I learned the most?
Well, I learned the most in radio just because it was so fly by the seat of your pants, under-resourced. And you just were like going, just trying to stay alive. But the learning curve was so steep because you were exposed to so many people. In TV, you're doing one story usually if you're reporting. You maybe have 2 or 3 people you interview, and that's it. Most of the day is spent commuting here and there to get your interviews and going through tape, but it's pretty compressed. In radio, you could have, 10 guests who could range from someone who just took a DNA test and found out their dad wasn't their dad to, the premier coming on to try to defend something. It was just such a broad range of subjects that the learning curve was woo, and I loved that. I mean, that just was super exciting. But in terms of the people, every newsroom is like super cool, like a little family. Yep. But that Edmonton newsroom for me was just really like a family. And the people that I met at the very beginning of my career, some of them are still my best friends. Yeah. And most people are not in media anymore, but it just, it's such a cool job. I mean, I feel bad for the younger people now who say, well, I don't know, is there even any point in going into media? And it was like, yes, there is. And it's going to be challenging. And it's going to be hard. And these days, you can't just go in and say, I'm going to be the reporter, because now you're going to have to be the reporter and the cameraman, and you're going to drive yourself somewhere, and you might have to edit it, and then you might have to go do your own live hit. And it's really much more insular. You're on your own a lot, which makes it less fun and less supported, but it'll turn around. Yep. It's going to turn around.
So what are you up to now? And I know we talked earlier before we recorded about you're going to start a podcast.
I'm starting a podcast, which is exciting. It's called Change My Mind. And this sort of cycles back to what we were talking about, in that we're living in a highly polarized, tense, angry era where people have sort of chosen their rabbit holes to go down and they don't want to hear anything else. It's like a confirmation bias. I'll take the information that substantiates what I already believe, and I'm going to ignore everything else. And that's a really unhealthy place for us all to be, regardless of your politics, regardless of what you think. And so with my experience in radio, with just having really good, respectful conversations like we're having with someone else, where you can just go on a journey together and learn. So I'm coming in trying to pick subjects that people are talking about that have lots of tentacles, that are interesting and in the news cycle, that I have an opinion. I have a bias, obviously, because we all do, but I'm willing to change my mind if you can give me some other information. So it's not a showy, well, no, you must prove to me and all that. It's more going into it open-minded, having a conversation with a good guest, getting to the end of the journey, and then deciding, what did I learn from that? Like, what was really relevant in that kind of made me move my personal mental yardsticks. So that's the premise of it, is respectful, open-minded conversation that hopefully everybody can learn from. And just the reminder that every time, regardless of the circumstance, you should go into it with an open heart and an open mind and just say, hey, let's have a good conversation. And I'm interested to know what you think about things, because that makes me a better person to learn more.
Yeah, that's a good message.
Hopefully.
I look forward to listening to it.
Yeah, thank you.
And maybe we'll even be guests at some point.
Yes, wouldn't that be cool? I would have to come here and steal all of your amazing set. I wish this was mine. Yeah.
So is this gonna be like a home studio thing, or?
Well, doing it through this new podcasting technology, which you guys are also using a bit, called Riverside. So it's pretty cool. So it's like AI generated. I'll do it remote. I have kind of a pseudo co-host, but she's more like a co-creator, co-producer, Melanie Nagy, who used to be a CTV national reporter. She's on the island now, and so I'm going to be the primary host, and she's almost my debriefer.
Yep.
So going into it, I'm kind of stating where I'm at, what the podcast is going to be about. She joins and sort of probes a bit. What do you think? What are you concerned about? What are you worried about? What do you, this, that, just to get that on the table. The guest comes in, just me and the guest. When they leave, my producer comes back in and starts to debrief. What did you think? What struck you the most? That kind of thing. So because she's remote, I'm remote, and this platform allows you to bring in a guest remotely. Yep. That's the way we're going to do it. AI is like, have you been fooling around with the Chat GPT or any of that?
That's not my thing, but Mark for sure. He's all over that.
I resisted it a bit, and then I thought, you know what? Just like, if you don't tiptoe into it and start to figure it out, it's going to bowl you over, because AI is coming whether you like it or not. And this podcasting platform does bizarro things, like on its own. It will write a full blog post, a newsletter about your, and it does it instantly. So it'll take, 45 minutes of content and go boom, and it sounds amazing. It'll pick thumbnails. It'll pick photos of you during the cast to use for promotion. It'll pick under 1 minute promo clips. And you're just like, this is like almost idiot proof, but I'm going to knock on the table once I've said that. So hopefully it doesn't blow up in my face.
Well, we look forward to it, and I want to thank you for your time coming in today.
Thank you.
And thank you for your kind words. Someone of your caliber, if the studio looks good to you, that says a lot.
Well, and the host, I think you do an excellent job, because you're very authentic and you listen really well, and it was easy and fun to talk to you. And I don't know how long we've been talking for, but it felt like it was about 10 minutes. So thank you for making me feel so comfortable.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. So we have a giveaway here from Milwaukee for today's podcast. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll pick through the comments randomly. And one winner is going to win coffee cup, hat, and cozy from Milwaukee. Thank you for listening.